All right, this is a juicy scoop from the New York Times. Listen up. Donald Trump's personal assistant, the person who sits right outside the Oval Office all day long and sees and hears more than just about anyone else, is out of that sensitive and crucial post after an accusation that she dished about the president with reporters. Madeleine Westerhout had served as the president's gatekeeper since day one of the administration. New York Times broke the story last night and reports, quote, Ms. Westerhout's abrupt and unexpected departure came after Mr. Trump learned on Thursday that she had indiscreetly shared details about his family and the Oval Office operations she was part of at a recent off-the-record dinner with reporters staying at hotels near Bedminster, New Jersey during the president's working vacation. And according to one of the sources, Westerhout's reported breach of trust means she's now a so-called separated employee, so she won't even be able to return to the White House. Joining our conversation, New York Times editorial board member Mara Gay. We've also got NBC News correspondent Hans Nichols, who I'm told on good authority has spent some time gathering amid other reporters near Bedminster. So what's that scene like, and what do you make of what the Times has reported?
Do you want the color or do you want the scene? There's carpet in a lot of the restaurants.
It's Friday before Labor Day. Give me some color. I've got some color. There are 8 people that work in the White House, and 2 of them look like Hope Hicks. It's kind of amazing. I'd never heard of this person or seen her picture, but
well, it was a crucial job. And as you know, proximity is power, right? There's an office right outside of the Oval Office, so it's a gatekeeper. It's a crucial job. It's the kind of source that reporters want to cultivate. You remember from your time in the Bush White House, when you travel, it's an opportunity for reporters to go out and drink with sources. And I say drink, and I mean drink heavily sometimes, because you want to gain trust. The whole name of the game is to have these off-the-record conversations so that you can kind of trying to figure out and piece together what's happening inside the White House. So at Bedminster, it depends on where the press stays. They stay at different hotels. You try to get together and have these types of conversations. What's unique here is not these dinners happen. They're fairly routine across all administrations. What's unique here is that she shared something as of personal detail, according to NBC News. The New York Times is saying a family matter. We still, Nicole, and I think this is crucial, we actually don't know what that was. And given, as you're alluding to, that this is a Friday in late August, and you probably have a lot of bored reporters around, I suspect we may find out just what that is. We're also going to talk to the president in about an hour if he talks and before he leaves for Camp David on the South Lawn. So maybe that's my first question. Why did she abruptly resign?
But just to sort of, I think, pull back the curtain even more, I mean, the dynamic is exactly as you've described. I know you and Mark because of dinners like this. You both traveled with George W. Bush and John McCain and other people that I work for. What is sacred and what hasn't been broken, to my knowledge, is that whatever she shared has remained off the record as of yet, right?
Correct. But off the record means... But the president
found out about it.
Yeah, but off the record means different things to different people. You remember, when Obama distilled his foreign policy in the back of Air Force One, and I can talk about it because I wasn't on the plane, and it's now been reported, but his driving doctrine was don't do stupid stuff, except he said that with a different S word. Mm-hmm. And that was initially conveyed off the record, and that somehow to reporters, and that somehow leaked out. So, look, there's off the record, and then there's off the record, and then there's another layer of off the record. If something is truly damaging, sources really don't tell you about it. And so a lot of this can be fairly innocent stuff. We'll see how innocent this is if it ultimately find out. But it's building trust. It's having these conversations. Sure. I mean, but I think there's something different here. And I know this is a Friday afternoon story, but there's something different here that we haven't quite gotten the bottom of. Maybe the president will reveal it. Maybe it'll be from additional reporting. But I suspect we haven't heard the end of this particular anecdote, I suppose, that's turned into more of an episode. Nicole?
I see this story from both perches on which I've sat. One is someone who traveled with the president and a candidate and was around them enough to sort of hear them on the phone with their kids and their family and know that what's private is private, as well as one who's been at those dinners and has sort of talked about some of the indignities of my job more openly at a bar or at a dinner. Do you know anything? Can you add anything to the story? It's your paper.
It's my paper, and I guarantee you Maggie Haberman and Annie Carney will not tell me a thing about that hasn't been already in the paper.
This is a Haberman-Carney scoop.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's if you are inside this world, there are a million of auxiliary questions here, which is, how did the president find out about it?
Right.
Was it innocuous, and was the president responding because he maybe didn't want her working there anyway? How big was the circle? Who was at the dinner? And of course, what was the thing about his family? I mean, there's a lot of, again, procedural noise around this, but the fact is, look, there is not a more sensitive job in the White House, pretty much, than the job that she has, and she's basically just there, and she hears things, and she knows who calls, and she knows who walks in, who walks out, family stuff, and it's almost zero tolerance as far as what you can say. And look, occasionally you're going to get burned, and it sounds like she did.
Occasionally you're going to get caught. I'd never heard of her before, so let me read a little bit about who she is. This is from our friend Tim Alberta, who writes about her in his book American Carnage. 25-year-old Madeleine Westerhout broke down crying on election night, inconsolable over Trump's victory. She should have come over here. To the amusement of her RNC peers, she was later chosen as the president. That was a joke, Twitter. To the amusement of her RNC peers, she was later chosen as the president's executive assistant and now sits just outside the Oval Office. So I don't know anything about her, but again, she was weeping on election night when Trump won, and then to the and I think I've read Tim Alberta's book. It's exquisitely reported. I trust this account. To the amusement of her RNC peers, meaning they thought it was funny that the 25-year-old woman who cried on election night when Trump won was chosen basically as the gatekeeper, sitting just outside the Oval. That's just an intriguing piece of Madeleine's bio.
It adds a little bit of intrigue to. Did she kind of reveal something innocuous that the president got upset with? Or has she been serving as a masterful source for some of what we've been reading? I doubt it too, but I think there's been so much secrecy and privacy and staff upheaval as well in this White House that it's hard not to kind of let your imagination get going about what she might know.
Yeah, that's why that stood out. So she was tearful on election night. I want to ask you one other sort of category of questions, Rep. This, to me, has all the things the president cares about in it. A person who really does see probably the most personal aspects of his life, not just his job, but his life. A person who was out with reporters who he cares about more than anybody else in his life. He cares about his coverage and what reporters think about him more than he cares about what allies think about him, more than he cares about what anyone else cares about him. So this was someone who had all the goods on him, talking to the people among whom the president is most self-conscious.
I think that you hit the core, because I think the fact that you have a president that's so over the top with wanting reporters and the media to have this image of him, that it could be innocuous, it could be something of value that she said. But don't get between me and the press. Don't deal with anything that could in any way deal with my brand that I'm not controlling. And we're talking about former presidents who, of course, always wanted to protect their presidency, but they also were comfortable with, you're going to get negative press, you're going to get good press. Right. He's obsessed with this. This is a man that watches television all day and all night. So what are you talking to anybody for? It could be absolutely nothing. And as far as her crying on election night, we read reports that the First Lady cried on election night. So she had a lot of company.
And again, I should say, and Hans, I'll give you the last word on this. We don't know if she was. We don't know the nature of those tears. Election nights could be emotional, so we'll just leave Tim Alberta's reporting intact for let it speak for itself. But you're going to head out there, going to try to get some information out of him, and anything to button this really intriguing story up for us. And anyone that you've heard of is going to take her spot.
My final thought is going to be from a reporter who will rename anonymous, who has this metric. He says 3 off the records equal 1 background. Now, I know none of us would ever use that, but we all respect off the record. Look, we'll see what the president says, and there's more reporting to do on this. If there was, I mean, look, there are serious leaks that you can have sometimes about matters of state, about, classified information. Those are big deals. This seems more like a parlor game, but we'll see if the president engages on it here in just a little bit.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.